story number 1, fitting appointment. I was counting the register drawer when she came in. 8:58 on a Thursday evening, spring rain hammering the storefront glass. I remember thinking I'd have maybe 2 minutes to lock up before 8 o'clock, and then she appeared, soaked, her damp coat dripping onto the white tile floor. She apologized immediately. That's what I remember most clearly now. How sorry she sounded, like she was genuinely distressed about the inconvenience. She said her wedding was next week, that she'd been driving around all day looking for the right dress, that she'd seen our window display and knew it was the one. Could I please, just for a few minutes, let her try something on? She wouldn't take long, she promised. I should have said no. I had the right to refuse. But there was something in her voice that made me feel like refusing would be cruel. She seemed desperate in a way that felt familiar. I'd helped hundreds of brides in that state, panicked about timing, about whether they'd made the right choice. So I told her yes, just quickly, and I locked the register. That's when I noticed her perfume. It was overwhelming, almost chemical, the kind of floral scent that coats your throat and makes it hard to breathe. It was so strong that I wondered if she'd applied it in the car, if she was nervous about something. I made a mental note to open a window later, and then I saw her neck. There were scratches there, 3 or 4 of them, fresh enough that they were still slightly red. Not deep, but deliberate looking. The kind of scratches you get when someone's fingernails catch your skin. She had her collar turned up, but the scratches were visible anyway, running from her jaw toward her collarbone. I told myself it was probably nothing. A cat. A branch. She seemed fine otherwise. She walked directly to the sample room, where we keep the display gowns, moving like she knew exactly where she was going. I unlocked the door, and she stepped inside. And then she went back out to the sales floor and walked to the front entrance. I watched her turn the deadbolt from the inside, locking the door. She said she didn't want anyone else coming in and interrupting her appointment. She said it casually, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I remember standing there for a moment, just processing that. It was a reasonable thing to do, I told myself. Customers sometimes did that. It made sense. She wanted privacy. But something in my chest had tightened, and I couldn't quite explain why. She tried on the first gown, a simple ivory sheath with delicate beading. It fit her well. She looked at herself in the mirror and asked if we had other sizes available. While I was showing her the inventory, she started asking questions. Did we have a stockroom in the back? How was it laid out? Did we have access to the alley behind the mall? Where exactly were our security cameras positioned? I answered her at first without thinking much about it. Brides ask practical questions sometimes, but the way she asked felt different. She wasn't asking about the dress anymore. She was asking about the building. I told her I needed to grab another size from the stockroom, and I turned toward the back. She stepped directly into the doorway, blocking my path. She was thin, smaller than me, but she positioned herself so I couldn't pass without pushing past her. She asked if I lived alone. She asked if anyone knew I was still here. That's when my hands started shaking. I told her I needed to get something from the back office, and I moved toward her, but she didn't move. She just asked again, very calmly, if there was a rear exit. How often did police patrol the strip mall? Was the loading bay usually locked? I didn't answer. I walked backward, away from her, toward the register counter. My mind was moving very fast now, faster than I wanted it to. I was thinking about how she'd locked the front door. I was thinking about her scratches, I was thinking about how she'd asked about cameras and exits, and whether anyone knew where I was. My hand was shaking so badly I almost couldn't grip it, but I reached under the counter and pressed the silent alarm button. It's there for exactly this reason. I pressed it and I kept my hand steady, and I looked at her face. She was watching me. She knew what I'd done. I grabbed the fire extinguisher from the wall. I'd trained for this. We all trained for this. And I sprayed it directly at her face. The white powder came out in a thick cloud, and she made a sound, a sharp intake of breath, and I didn't wait to see what she did next. I ran through the stockroom, past the racks of sample gowns, past the fitting rooms, toward the loading bay door. My keys were in my pocket. My hands were still shaking, but I got the door open, and I ran out into the rain. The police found me 20 minutes later in the parking lot, sitting on the curb behind my car. I was soaked through, and I couldn't stop shaking. They found her purse inside the shop, abandoned near the sample room. Inside were 3 different driver's licenses. 3 different names, 3 different faces. None of them matched the woman I'd seen. The scratches on her neck, the officer told me later, were consistent with defensive wounds. Someone fighting back. The kind of marks you get when someone's trying to get away from you. I don't know her name. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't pressed that button. The police said they found no record of her anywhere, no matching prints, no footage of her arriving or leaving. She just disappeared into the rain. I still work at the shop. I still close at 8 o'clock. But I lock the front door at 7:50, 5 now, and I don't let anyone in. Sometimes I think about that perfume, how it burned my throat. Sometimes I wonder if she's still out there, looking for another boutique, another manager closing alone. Sometimes I wonder if she's found one. Story number 2, Creek Crossing. I finished logging the last soil samples around 5:40, 5 in the evening. The sky had been threatening rain all afternoon, and by the time I packed the core tubes into their cases, the clouds had turned the color of wet concrete. I was driving back out on Forest Service Road 12 when the rain hit. Not hard, just steady and cold. The kind that makes everything smell like iron and rot. The creek crossing at mile marker 7 was already running high. I'd crossed it that morning without trouble, but now the water was moving fast, carrying branches and debris. I stopped at the edge and waited for it to settle, or at least for me to convince myself it was passable. The fog was getting thicker. I could barely see 20 feet ahead. I decided to try it. My truck is old but solid, and I've crossed worse. I eased into the water, felt it rise against the undercarriage, and made it about halfway before the engine choked and died. Just like that. No warning. The water wasn't even at the hood line yet, so I knew it wasn't a hydro lock situation. Probably just the ignition getting wet, or something loose in the electrical system. I tried the starter again. Nothing. The engine turned over, but wouldn't catch. I sat there for a minute, hands on the wheel, listening to the rain on the roof and the sound of the creek moving past. It was getting dark fast. I had a flashlight and a radio, and I could call for a tow truck, but the nearest one was probably 40 minutes away. I decided to wait. Sometimes these things just need a few minutes to dry out. That's when I saw the headlights. They appeared in my mirror, yellow and diffused through the fog. Another vehicle, coming from the direction I'd come from. I felt a small wave of relief. Probably another surveyor, or maybe a ranger checking on the road conditions after the storm. I turned on my hazard lights and waved my arm out the window. The headlights slowed as they approached. Through the fog, I could make out the shape of a pickup truck, dark-colored, no visible markings. It stopped about 20 feet behind me and just sat there, engine running. The headlights stayed on, bright enough that I could see them reflected in my mirror and on the water ahead. I waited. No one got out. The engine idled, steady and patient. I climbed out of my truck and called back toward them. "Hey, I'm stuck." "Do you have jumper cables?" "Nothing." The headlights didn't dim. The engine kept running. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds, feeling something shift in my chest. It was probably nothing. Maybe they were checking their phone or figuring out if they could help. But the way they just sat there, not moving, not responding, it didn't feel like nothing. The driver's side door of the pickup opened. A man got out, tall and broad-shouldered, silhouetted against the headlights. He wasn't moving toward me. He was moving toward my truck. The passenger door opened too, and a second man stepped out. He was holding something in his hand. A handheld spotlight, the kind with the heavy battery pack. He switched it on, and the beam cut through the fog like a blade. They started walking around my truck. The man with the spotlight was pointing it at my license plate, then at the windows where my survey equipment was visible. The GPS unit, the sample cases, the laser level. He raised his phone and took a picture. Then another. The other man was doing the same thing on the driver's side, photographing my plates, my door handle, the interior of my cab. "Hey," I called out. "What are you doing?" They didn't respond. They didn't even look at me. They just kept moving around my truck with the methodical slowness of people doing a job they'd done before. The man on the driver's side reached out and tried my door handle. Just pulled it, testing, like he was checking if it was locked. Something cold moved down my spine. Not the rain, something else. I called out again, louder this time. "What do you want?" Still nothing. The man with the spotlight was now photographing the back of my truck, the equipment rack, the mud on the bumper. The other man had moved to the passenger side and was looking in the window, his face close to the glass. I could taste metal in my mouth, adrenaline, I think, mixed with the smell of damp earth and wet vegetation. My hands were shaking. I didn't think about it. I just moved. I grabbed my GPS unit and my sample case from the front seat, the things I couldn't afford to lose, and I started walking toward the creek. Not running. Not yet. Just walking fast. "Hey," one of them called out. "Hey, stop." I didn't stop. I waded into the water. It was cold enough to make me gasp. The current was stronger than I'd expected, and the bottom was slick with mud. The water rose to my waist, then higher. I kept moving, keeping the GPS and sample case above my head, my eyes fixed on the tree line on the far side. Behind me, I heard the spotlight sweep across the water. Then I heard boots splashing. One of them was coming in after me. I moved faster. The water was up to my chest now, and the current was pulling at my legs. My boots were slipping on the creek bed. I could hear the man behind me, maybe 15 feet back, the water spraying around him as he waded in. The spotlight was sweeping back and forth, catching me in its beam every few seconds. I reached the far bank and scrambled up, my hands slipping in the mud. My legs were numb from the cold. I didn't look back. I just pushed into the tree line, into the fog and the darkness, and kept moving until the sound of the water and the spotlight faded behind me. I walked through the forest for maybe an hour, using my flashlight, moving uphill and away from the road. Eventually, I found a deer trail that led to a logging road I recognized. I followed it until I got cell service and called the ranger station. They found me around midnight, soaked and shaking, and drove me back to my truck. It was still there, but stripped. Every piece of equipment was gone. The GPS unit I'd taken with me was the only one I had left. The tools, the sample cases I'd left in the truck, the fuel cans, the laser level, all of it. They'd taken everything that was worth anything. There were boot prints in the mud around the truck, leading from the creek to where it sat, then disappearing into the darkness. The rangers said it was probably salvage thieves, people who strip equipment from vehicles in remote areas and sell it online. It happens. But they couldn't explain why two men would risk crossing a flooded creek in the dark just to steal survey equipment. They couldn't explain why they'd photographed my plates and my truck before taking anything. I filed a report. I got the truck towed. I've been back to work since then, but I don't go to that road anymore. And I think about those two men sometimes, about the way they moved around my truck like they were cataloging something, like they were checking off a list. I still don't know what they wanted. I still don't know if they would have come back across that creek if I hadn't run. I just know that I made the right choice, and that some choices, even the right ones, don't really feel like choices at all. Story number 3, voicemail loop. I was 3 hours into a client deadline when the power went out. 1 second the apartment was humming with the usual ambient noise. Refrigerator, laptop fan, the neighbor's television bleeding through the wall, and then nothing. Complete darkness except for my laptop screen casting that pale, cold light across my desk. I didn't panic. I've lived downtown long enough to know that outages happen. I checked my phone for the time. 2:30, 2 in the morning. My insomnia had been cooperative tonight, at least. I was actually making progress on the design mock-ups, and I didn't want to lose momentum, so I just kept working by the glow of my screen. That's when my phone rang. The sound was loud enough to make me flinch. I looked at the caller ID. It was my own number. I stared at it for a moment, listening to the ringtone echo in the dark apartment. My first thought was that it was a spoofing thing. Telemarketers spoofing local numbers to make you more likely to pick up. I'd been getting calls like that for months. Area code 503, my area code, but never actually me. I answered out of something like curiosity, or maybe just the irritation of being interrupted. "Hello," I said. The voice that came back was mine, not similar to mine, not an approximation. It was my voice exactly, speaking in that flat, clinical tone I recognized immediately. It was reciting my address, my actual address, the full thing, my street, my apartment number, the zip code. Then it continued, still in my voice, describing my daily routine. Wake at 9, coffee at the kitchen counter, work from desk until noon, lunch break at 1, back to work until evening. I hung up. My hands were shaking. I told myself it was a deep fake. Someone had scraped audio from somewhere and synthesized it. It wasn't perfect. The technology was getting better. But you could usually hear the uncanny valley in it, that slight digital shimmer. Except I hadn't heard that. I'd heard myself. I sat there in the dark, staring at my phone screen. 11 minutes later, it rang again. Same number. I answered because I needed to know. This time, the voice didn't just recite my routine. It described my apartment, the layout, the fact that my bed was against the north wall, that I had a spare key under the loose brick in the bathroom. That detail made my stomach drop because I had never said that out loud. I'd recorded therapy sessions on my phone months ago, voice memos for self-reflection, but I'd never mentioned the key. I'd never told anyone. I hung up and didn't answer the next time it rang, but I could see it ringing. My own number over and over. I tried to think through this rationally. Someone had access to my recordings. Someone had synthesized my voice. But the details about the key, how would they know that? I opened my laptop and pulled up the voice memos folder. I scrolled through them. Dozens of recordings, all labeled by date. I clicked on one at random and listened. It was me, talking about work stress, about my sleep schedule, about the anxiety that kept me awake at night. My phone rang again. 11 minutes had passed. I answered. My voice was describing my apartment again, but with new details. The exact position of my desk. The fact that I was awake right now. The specific time, 2:50, 3 in the morning. And underneath my voice, there was something else. A faint static hiss, rhythmic and deliberate. It took me a moment to understand what I was hearing. It sounded like breathing. Slow, measured breathing. Like someone standing very still in the dark, listening. I hung up and didn't wait for the next call. I grabbed my laptop and my phone and I left. I didn't turn on lights. I didn't lock the door behind me. I just walked out of my apartment and down the hallway, moving quickly but trying not to run. The stairwell was pitch black. I used my phone's flashlight and took the stairs 2 at a time. Outside, the street was empty. The power outage had affected the whole block. The streetlights were dark, and most of the storefronts were black. But there was a diner 6 blocks east that stayed open 24 hours. I knew it well. I'd been there countless times during insomnia spirals. I walked fast, not looking back. My phone stayed silent. The diner was bright and warm, and full of the smell of coffee and fried food. There were maybe 5 other people there. A couple in a booth, an older man at the counter, a tired-looking server. I sat in a booth in the back corner where I could see the door and pulled out my laptop. I documented everything. The exact times of the calls. The content of each recording. I took screenshots of my phone's call log. Then I opened my laptop and went to my phone company's website and started a chat with customer support. It took 20 minutes to get through the verification process. When I finally explained what was happening, the representative asked me to hold while they looked into it. I watched the diner's front door. My phone stayed silent. The representative came back. They said they'd traced the calls, all of them. They were originating from a device connected to my building's internal network, the building's Wi-Fi system. Someone in the building had spoofed my number and was using a voice synthesis program. But they were doing it from inside the network. They were physically in my building. I didn't go back that night. I sat in that diner booth and watched my phone. At exactly 11 minutes past the hour, it rang again. My own number. I didn't answer. I just watched it ring and watched the call log update. The voice on the recording, I could hear it through the phone speaker, even though I wasn't holding it to my ear, was describing the route I'd taken to the diner, the streets I'd walked, the turns I'd made, the diner itself, the booth I was sitting in. The server came by and asked if I wanted more coffee. I said yes. She refilled my cup and didn't ask why I looked terrified. My phone rang again at exactly 11 minutes past. I didn't answer. I just sat there, watching the screen light up with my own number, listening to my own voice describe things I'd never said aloud, breathing underneath it all like someone standing in the dark, waiting. The sun came up eventually. The power came back on. The diner filled up with the morning crowd. People on their way to work. People who looked normal and tired and safe. I'm still not sure what I'm supposed to